Karen Whitfield, a 45-year-old suburbanite with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a wardrobe that screamed privilege, was the undisputed leader of her tight-knit circle of equally entitled friends. Her demeanor exuded a confidence bordering on arrogance, a belief that her actions would never have consequences. This Saturday, as usual, she led her clique into the bustling shopping mall, their steps brisk and determined, each woman clutching a spray bottle filled with green paint. Their so-called mission, an unspoken game of power, was rooted in prejudice and cruelty. Karen had convinced her friends that they were cleaning up their space, a thinly veiled excuse to harass black shoppers. As they moved through the food court, their laughter echoed, a grating symphony of mockery and malice. Shoppers parted to avoid them, some out of discomfort, others in silent complicity. Their latest target was Darnell, a 22-year-old college student stopping for lunch after a long shift at work. Darnell, dressed in a plain gray hoodie and jeans, froze in disbelief as Karen sprayed him with green paint. The cold liquid soaked into his hoodie, creating a garish stain that mirrored the humiliation on his face. "It's just a joke," Karen crowed, her voice dripping with derision. "Learn to take one." Her cronies burst into laughter, their faces alight with malicious delight. Unbeknownst to Karen, her actions had not gone unnoticed. Seated at a corner table in the cafe, General Marcus Carter, a towering figure with a commanding presence, sipped his coffee in silence. The decorated U.S. Army officer, his steel-gray eyes sharp and discerning, had been watching the scene unfold. Darnell's shock and humiliation struck a nerve deep within him. His mind flashed back to memories of battles far from home, not just against external enemies, but against the systemic racism embedded in the structures he had vowed to defend. Marcus set his cup down slowly, his gaze never leaving Karen and her friends. His jaw tightened, and a calm, resolute anger settled over him. This wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was a stark reminder of the prejudice he had spent his life fighting. He stood, ready to confront the injustice head-on. The mall seemed to hold its breath as Marcus Carter, his tall frame radiating authority, rose from his seat. Dressed sharply in his military uniform, his medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights, he moved with purpose toward the food court. Conversations hushed, and heads turned, the silent respect commanded by his presence rippling through the bustling space. Karen Whitfield, oblivious to the growing attention, raised her spray bottle toward her next targets, a black mother and her young son, who stood frozen in place, fear flickering in their wide eyes. Just as Karen's finger tightened on the trigger, Marcus's deep, measured voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone calm but firm, each word laced with an undeniable authority. "Can you explain what you're doing?" Karen spun around, startled, the spray bottle slipping slightly in her grasp. She froze momentarily under Marcus's steely gaze. Her friends behind her exchanged nervous glances, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Karen, however, quickly masked her hesitation, her bravado returning like a shield. "It's none of your business," she snapped, lifting her chin defiantly. "We're just having fun." Marcus's expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried a weight that silenced even the whispers of the growing crowd. "That doesn't look like fun to me," he said evenly, gesturing toward the mother and son, who were clutching each other tightly. "It looks like harassment and vandalism, and I don't tolerate either." The crowd began to swell, shoppers pausing mid-step to witness the confrontation. Smartphones appeared, recording the scene from every angle. The murmurs grew louder, a wave of disapproval washing over Karen and her clique. Emboldened by her friend's presence, Karen turned toward them for support. Yet, as her eyes met theirs, she realized they had stepped back slightly, their bravado melting under the weight of public scrutiny. Karen's confidence faltered, her smirk slipping into a forced grin. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words died in her throat as the crowd began to murmur louder. The reality of her position settled heavily upon her, and for the first time, Karen felt the cracks in the armor of her entitlement. Mall security arrived within minutes, cutting through the dense crowd that had gathered to watch the unfolding drama. The head of security, a stocky man with a stern expression, quickly assessed the scene before approaching Marcus Carter. The general's upright posture and composed demeanor immediately commanded the officer's attention. "Sir, what seems to be the issue here?" the security guard asked. Marcus gestured toward Karen and her friends, his voice steady and deliberate. "These individuals have been targeting black shoppers, spraying them with paint, under the guise of a so-called prank. I witnessed them harassing a young man, and was about to intervene again, when they turned their attention to a mother and her child." Karen's friends began to mumble excuses, their earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of the accusations. "It's not what it looks like," one of them stammered. "We were just messing around, no harm meant." The head of security, unimpressed, crossed his arms and looked at the group sternly. "We'll let the police decide that." Moments later, 2 police officers arrived, their presence adding to the tension. They began taking statements, speaking first to Marcus, whose account was clear and methodical. His authoritative tone brooked no argument, and the growing crowd murmured their agreement. Karen's panic began to rise. "This is just a misunderstanding," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with desperation. "We didn't mean any harm. It was a joke, that's all." Marcus turned to face her, his calm exterior belying the anger simmering beneath the surface. He held her gaze, his words deliberate and cutting. "Harm doesn't always come from intent, ma'am. Sometimes it's the result of ignorance and privilege, both of which you seem to have in spades." Karen's face flushed crimson as his words struck home, the whispers from the crowd growing louder around her. For the first time, the reality of her actions began to sink in. This was no longer a private indulgence of entitlement. It was a public spectacle, and the consequences were coming for her faster than she could comprehend. By evening, the incident at the mall had spread like wildfire across social media. Videos captured from multiple angles showed Karen's actions in excruciating detail, paired with Marcus Carter's calm yet firm intervention. While Marcus was hailed as a hero for standing up against injustice, Karen became a symbol of unchecked privilege and casual racism. The hashtags #KarenExposed and #HeroGeneral trended as the internet dissected every aspect of the confrontation. Karen's life quickly unraveled. The mall issued an immediate ban against her and her friends, deeming their behavior unacceptable. Her employer, citing a violation of company values, terminated her contract without hesitation. Even her once loyal social circle distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the backlash. For Marcus, however, the public praise felt hollow. Sitting alone in his modest living room, the glow of his phone reflected the countless messages of gratitude flooding in. Yet, his thoughts lingered on the systemic issue. How many Karens were out there, emboldened by ignorance and unchecked privilege? He knew his intervention was a moment, not a solution. Karen, too, faced a crossroads. Stripped of her defenses, she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Days of reflection led her to a community center, where she began volunteering. It started as penance, but soon became a genuine effort to rebuild her humanity. The incident left an indelible mark on everyone involved, revealing society's fractures and the transformative power of accountability. For Karen, it was the painful but necessary beginning of a long path toward redemption.